What's going on YouTube? This is Crazy Star 71 here bringing another video. Today I'm bringing a video on Uchuu Sentai Kyuranger episode 27. The episode is called Indaver Panic on the Orion. And the episode for the most part is basically a recap episode with a little bit of bigger story mixed in. Not too much so, but definitely a little bit that kind of gives you a sense of what might happen later on. Even though next episode isn't going to really focus on the past Rangers, and when I say past Rangers, I mean the Rangers that are in the past right now. This episode focuses on them now, but the next episode should be focused a lot more towards the present day Rangers, the ones that are going after Naga. So that's important to note. Now, as far as things go, as I said before, this is a recap episode, so it doesn't necessarily, it was not really meant to be huge on bigger story, but more so on making people aware of what's happened so far. So it goes over, the introductions to all the Kyurangers, it goes over all the new ones, it goes over the Kyotama and the different types. It goes over the Voyagers, it goes over the different mechas and the combinations that come along with it. And it touches upon all that stuff in a pretty good way. And I'll go over it now with you guys, what actually happens in the episode. For starters, what ends up happening is that the Kyurangers that are in the past, which includes Tsurugi, Champ, Stinger, Raptor, and Spada, as well as Sho, are traveling on traveling on the Orion, and suddenly what ends up happening is that they end up noticing that there is something going on the Orion ship, and it turns out that there are some Indavers that's stowed away on the ship. And what happens is that the Kyurangers decide to split up on the ship to go and hunt down these Indavers. So, for example, Champ and Stinger go after one of them. Sho and Raptor go after one of them. Sho has a hard time during this episode a lot because he's older and he's a little bit more of a goofy character, and he ends up actually exerting himself a little too much, so Raptor has to help him out. At the same time, we also have Tsurugi and Spada working together, and what happens is that Tsurugi and Spada end up dealing with one of the Indavers, and what ends up happening is that apparently the Indavers are wearing masks, and that's something that we didn't really realize was the case, but apparently they wear masks that are an additional piece to the overall costume, and when they're knocked off, they basically allow them to gain back their ability to speak. And apparently with the mask, they inhibit it. So that's something that's interesting, which is why when the Indavers fight, they never talk. They're always, making random noises or whatever, because they can't speak in full and clear sentences, because that's just how it is. And what happens is that the Endeavor that Spada and Tsurugi talk about is ends up talking about how, I'm here because I need your help, and the Endeavor mentions how you might remember me from the past, from that one time, and Spada's like, oh yeah, wait, that one time, what are you talking about? Because the thing is that there's so many Indavers, and it's sort of like, how could you really say that, because there's so many of them. And again, they're multicolored, so it's not like they're all yellow, they're all red, they're all blue. There's a good variety to the Indavers typically. So anyway, what ends up happening is that they end up talking, and they end up finding out that they want help because they've noticed how the Kyurangers have been getting lots of teammates, and they want to join the Kyurangers. And the thing is that they're surprised about this, and what ends up happening is that they do recall how different members were introduced, but first I also mentioned how the Endeavor also mentions how he got on the ship and how his teammates got on the ship, which is that when they were partying during the previous episode, the Kyurangers weren't looking, and so they snuck on the ship during that time. But as far as things go, they end up doing a recap of how the different Kyurangers got introduced, and they also show off when was the Endeavor that they were talking to seen, and that was during the first episode when Lucky crashed down on a planet. He was one of the Indavers that got destroyed during the first episode. So, or was at least attacked. So what ends up happening is they end up going through like a whole bunch of the Kyurangers, the Voyagers that go with them, and how they were introduced, and how important Lucky has been. And then eventually they also go over some more. They also end up. I'm trying to make sure I get this right. They also end up bringing back the Indavers to the center of the base, which, if you remember, there's like 4 of them that they initially find, but there's a 5th one that they're still trying to figure out where it is. And what happens is that the Indavers were originally called Inda, but when they gained the mass, they became Indavers, and they were forced to work crazy long hours and all that, and they're miserable. And what happens is that one of the Indavers also, like, Sho ends up fighting with, when Sho ends up exerting himself too much, and he damages his back. Now again, Sho is older, and Sho's a lot more clumsy and a little bit more wild as a character, so makes sense. We also see the other Rangers on Earth, the other Kyurangers on Earth of the present, trying to look for Naga, and Hami is feeling guilty because of what she said to Naga still, and they're trying to make Hami feel better about it, and Balance is also saying, like, I'm sure we'll get him back, I'm sure he'll be fine in the end, trying to reassure her. At the same time, Balance is always a pretty joyous character, so it's kind of hard to deny, it's kind of hard for him to not be that way. But anyway, they discuss all that stuff, and then eventually we end up seeing Stinger and Champ go after another Endeavor, and then Spada joins to fight an Endeavor and uses a Kyotama to actually bind up the Endeavor. And then what happens is that Spada ends up going over what are the Kyotamas, and he mentions the transformation Kyotamas, the attack Kyotamas, the one that they use to actually attack enemies, the utility Kyotamas, the ones that allow them to perform certain actions, like putting their foes to sleep or something like that. And then also the ones that are just plain fun, like when in the previous episode they made the people in the barber shop have crazy hair and all that. Like, that was more of a goofy Kyotama. What ends up happening also is that when they finally get all get the 4 Endeavors into the same place, Tsurugi initially wants to get rid of them all, but the others say that maybe we can find out new information and all that. And they also mention how, and we also end up seeing that the main computer is being used by the leader of the group, which is like the red Endeavor. And he mentions how he wants to take them off the ship, and he wants to destroy them and gain control so that they can become Suyu Endeavors. And what ends up happening is that they also mention how there's a secret to Don Armage and all that, and that they're trying to hide that. And what ends up happening is that eventually the Kyurangers do end up getting knocked off the ship, and they encounter a T-Rex, which basically looks like the CGI Gabotira that they used for the Kyuranger movie when they had the Abba Ranger cast and the Jew Ranger cast appear in the special movie that they had when they went up against, I believe it was the Go Busters. And when it was during like the introduction of the Tokyuja cast as well. So yeah, that was so it was cool seeing that there, but it didn't talk and it wasn't saying anything like that. But anyway, the Endeavor, like the Kyurangers end up fighting over different things, and eventually the 5 Endeavors appear, and they're like, oh, this should be very easy. They seem to be fighting them, and it shouldn't be any problem. And what happens is that the leader, the red one, basically tries to convince Tsurugi to separate from them because they're going to get in your way and all that. And he says, yes, they probably will. And then what happens is that it transfers over to the, present day Rangers, and they're searching for Naga still. And then they also mention how, I wonder how the Rangers in the past are doing. And like Lucky says, I'm sure they'll be doing fine. After all, they have Tsurugi, and then they do a whole background on Tsurugi and his addition, and how he's helped them so much, and now they've gained more power, even more so with like the Kyutamajin and all that other stuff. And then on top of that, we then end up seeing the Kyurangers of the past go back to their time, and we'll like talk about how, like, Tsurugi is mentioning how, yes, they might get my way, but you know what, I've committed to fighting alongside them, and I won't give up that fight, and I want their help. I want to work with them. And they eventually decide to do their morphing call kind of sequence where they basically say who they are, Fudameister and Phoenix Soldier and all that other stuff. But what happens is they do it without actually transforming, and they start fighting the Indavers. And then what happens is that towards the end, only Tsurugi ends up transforming into Ho-Oh Soldier, and basically does a finishing attack to destroy all 5 of them. I forgot to also mention that they do that the Indavers actually have their own morphing sequence or whatever, where they basically just say their names, and then they refer to themselves as Go Endeavor. So they say Dever Red, Dever Blue, Dever Yellow, Dever Black, Dever Commander. Those are the 5, and that's their transformation sequence. And what ends up happening is that it's a pretty cool little battle, and following this, what ends up happening is that they say, and maybe if we're lucky, we might even be able to become Maltrades if we really defeat you guys. And then what happens is that they end up, after defeating the Indavers, going back on the ship, and they say, okay, we have to keep going because we need to find out what is the secret to Daramaj. Which personally I already have a pretty clear idea, because it's been mentioned in some recent rumors what the secret of Daramaj is, and it's a pretty interesting one. And I also know some of the detail about what's going to happen in the next couple of episodes already, regarding the future of the show. But it should be interesting. And as far as the preview for the next episode goes, it's also pretty cool. What it is that it's going to be is that instead of it focusing on the Rangers in the past, it's going to focus on the Rangers that are in the present trying to find Naga. They're going to have to fight Akibamba, and also have to deal with Naga, and Naga's also going to end up fighting Balance, and there's going to be a whole entire sequence of fights going on there. And it should be a pretty interesting episode, and I'm looking forward to it a lot, because seeing Balance and Naga actually fight each other, after all, they're beyond close to each other, it's a big deal. So I'm definitely looking forward to it, and I'd love to hear your guys' opinions. Are you looking forward to seeing Balance and Naga fight each other? And as a whole, they also show off a character that will become more important in the show later on, because he supposedly will lead to Lucky gaining new powers, and also will lead to and also we end up seeing another character that looks like Naga, only a female, and her name is Echidna, and she's an interesting looking character. But we'll get into that soon. I'd love to know your opinions. Please remember to comment, subscribe, tell me what you guys think. Did you guys enjoy this episode? Again, I know it was primarily meant to be a recap episode, but I thought I would just address it anyway, and also because we're going through all these episodes. So again, next episode will be a lot more story heavy, and it should be pretty cool. But I'd love to know your guys' opinions. Please remember to comment, subscribe, tell me what you guys think, and I'll see you guys in the next video. So until then, guys, I'm Crazy Sarah, and goodbye, guys.